everybody. Welcome to the first event of this year's Fair Employment Week. I'm Sarika Bose, and I am the Contract Academic Staff Committee Chair at CAUT, and I teach in the English department at UBC. So Fair Employment Week is CAUT's annual campaign to raise awareness about precarious employment on campuses and support local organizing to improve the working conditions of contract academic staff. This year's events will provide an opportunity for contract academic staff from across the country to come together virtually to network with one another and discuss the issues they're facing. So we're very excited to start the week of online events with a members panel, where we will hear from academic staff about organizing that is happening across the country on issues that impact contract staff. I would like to take this moment to remind you that although this meeting is largely virtual, we all do our academic work on specific Indigenous, First Nations, and Métis territories. Some of these territories are governed by treaties, but some are still unceded. Today, I am participating in this workshop on the traditional unceded territories of the Musqueam and Coast Salish peoples. I would ask that you reflect on the conditions under which we occupy these spaces today and always. I will now hand things over to Justine de Jager, CAUT's education officer, to run through some of the logistics for today's session. So here you go, Justine.
Hello. Okay, so a few notes for Zoom for everyone today. First off, we have simultaneous interpretation from English to French and French to English available. To access that, you click on the interpretation icon on your toolbar. I will note that if you are not fluent in both English and French, you will need this tool because there will be presentations in both languages. Alors pour les francophones, si vous avez besoin de l'interprétation simultanée, vous pouvez l'accéder sur la barre d'outils. C'est l'icône du globe pour l'interprétation. Nous aurons des présentations en anglais et en français aujourd'hui. Okay, we will be recording today's session, so it will be available after the fact. We will be endeavoring to record just spotlighted speakers, but of course, if there's noise in your background, Zoom may flip to your video. So if you don't want to be included in the Zoom recording, we encourage you to just keep your video turned off for this session. For questions and answers, you can either type questions into the chat that's available to you, or you can raise your participant hand by clicking on participants. And then we can call on you in turn to ask questions of the panelists. And just we encourage you to keep yourself muted, as was mentioned, when you're not speaking. And that's it for me.
Okay, so today we're going to be hearing from 4 members about recent bargaining and organizing that has taken place on their campuses to address issues impacting contract academic staff. So our first speaker is Mike Eklund from the University of Ontario Institution of Technology. So Mike, please go ahead.
There we are. I hope you can hear me all right. Yes. And thank you for inviting me to this panel. I'm really excited to be participating in Employment Week with everybody, and welcome everybody here as well. So I'm going to talk about our experience as a faculty association with contract academic staff, which basically took place about 3 years or so, from 2017 to 2019, in which we organized them and got them into their first collective agreement. And again, I'm with Ontario Tech University, formerly rebranded from University of Ontario Institute of Technology. And how do I advance my slides? Just 1 sec. There we are. Okay, the situation at our university was that we had about a group of about 20 full-time limited term contract faculty members. They were working full-time, but excuse me, I have just a timer set here. They were working full-time, but they weren't unionized. And as far as we could tell, they might have been, somebody might know here, but one of the last non-unionized faculty groups in Ontario and possibly Canada. at least that we've been able to find. And they had been excluded from the Faculty Association because we had it's a new university. It's only about 16, 17 years old now, and it was created in a time of some financial crisis. And so they're coming up with all these crazy contracts. Different deans had different contracts, and we had a really hard time figuring out who was who were faculty members, who were something else. And so we organized the tenured and tenure track faculty first, and then a couple of years later, there was a teaching stream. And we always wanted, and we were always worried about the certification and votes because of, member list padding and so on that the university had engaged in earlier. So we were looking for an opportunity to certify them in such a small group that we'd actually be able to support them properly. But it had always been the intention to bring them into the association. So before this is what the policy looked like just before we organized them. Limited term academic associate procedures, which is approved by the provost and owned by the provost, and so on. And it had a purpose which on the surface indicated that they recognize the expertise and effectiveness of these academic associates. But in the procedures, and there's a bunch of them, there was this procedure 20 was for termination, which basically said that they could be terminated at any time as long as it's within the Employment Standards Act, if in the dean's opinion such action is deemed necessary. So that was not a great situation for contract academic staff, and I'm sure others have experienced that as well. So the opportunity came along in 2017, 2018. We consulted with the PSAC, who represented the other group of, in this case, part-time faculty, which we call sessionals at our university. And they agreed with us that these academic associates would best fit with the association. So we, at that point, felt comfortable going forward. And the thing that really triggered it, though, was people from Ontario might be familiar with Bill 148, which is best known for $15 minimum wage, which turned out to only be a $14 minimum wage. But part of that was also changes to the Labor Relations Act, which allowed new bargaining units to be consolidated into existing ones. So we saw this as the opportunity that we needed to be able to make sure that we could properly represent this small group. We're a fairly small association as well, but we would be able to bring them into the other bargaining units and combine them. So we started organizing as soon as Bill 41 came into law, which I think was in January 2018. And it took us a little while to get going. And finding them was not at all easy. When we did, it was very exciting to see their faces light up, that somebody actually wanted to speak to them. I think their experiences primarily with students and maybe signing a contract with the dean's administrative assistant once every year or two. And we were successful in identifying all of them. There's only one surprise when we saw the list, somebody that was working on a remote building far from campus. And this is sort of what the organizing looked like. This, I think, the last version of the sheet that I had with everybody's names. I blurred this to protect them, although it's largely public information. So you can see there we're trying to track down where they were, which faculty, where their office was, which was usually wrong or not listed anywhere. In some cases, they didn't have offices, but they had a rotating workspace where they shared a table with somebody, presumably just for office hours. And ended up having to track them down through the course catalog and know when they were going to be in lectures. And a few of them, that was the only way to find them, was to catch them on their way in or out of a lecture to talk to them about joining the Faculty Association. As I said, they were quite enthusiastic, and we got, this was our union cards that we had them sign. And we held several off-campus meetings and signed up a strong majority of them. We got 100% certification vote from the academic associates, which was very exciting. And then we made the application to the Labor Board under Bill 148 to join merge the bargaining units. Not surprisingly, the university objected to that. And at the Labor Board, they made the case that it would be appropriate for them to join the teaching stream, but didn't make any sense for them to be in the same bargaining units as a tenured and tenure track faculty, which we objected to and fought against. And I'm pleased to say that we were successful in getting the Labor Board to agree with us and combine them all into one bargaining unit, which I think is better for everybody. So then we had to bring them into the collective agreement. At that point, we were already in bargaining. We given notice, and the university was delaying, so we had a bit of time. But we received the notice from the Labor Board, I think, in August. And so we spent the end of the summer trying to combine the two existing collective agreements and bring in language for the academic associates as well. And we had to convince the tenure track faculty and the teaching faculty. So the tenure track faculty, it was their round of bargaining. They'd already approved their mandate. And the teaching faculty, who had just negotiated a year before that collective agreement, that they would have to, 2 years before that, that they would lose the third year of their collective agreement because it was now become the new one that we were renegotiating. So we were successful in doing all that. And in terms of the academic associates, we were successful getting them a course load reduction, hiring process, pension after 2 years, which is a legislative right, but is generally ignored at Ontario Tech. Some benefits, a salary floor with across the board increases for that, recognition of their time at U of T if they get hired into a teaching faculty position or a tenure track position, and some other rights for the academic associates. And I think significantly recognition as faculty members at the university and within the association. So just some highlights from the collective agreement. So got them down to a maximum of 7 courses, which is still high. The right to get paid overload or a reduction in future. Actual renewal terms for renewal of a contract, which they didn't have before. They're included, of course, in the no discrimination and harassment as any faculty member. So again, faculty members within the association and the university. The pension eligibility was written in the collective agreement, so it's clear. As we'll see, we're still struggling with that though, with the university. And instead of being able to be terminated at the dean's discretion, they would have to follow the discipline article to do so, just like with any other faculty member to that point, or other forms of discipline. So how things are going, there's still a lot of work to be done. Unfortunately, we have policy grievances filed right now. As in one case, it's because their contracts were not renewed and they were instead given sessional contracts to do basically the same work. So PSAC members, but we would have expected them to have their academic associate contract extended or renewed. And again, this question of pension eligibility. So there's a significant disagreement about what continuous service means. They're supposed to have 2 years continuous service, but there's very strange interpretations that we're having to fight. And of course, that was their first collective agreement. So there's quite a bit more work to be done in bringing their collective agreement rights up to a more equitable level with the teaching faculty and tenure track faculty. So that has been our experience over the past few years with the academic associates at Ontario Tech University. Thank you very much. Merci. I think you're on mute, Sarika.
Okay, can you hear me now? Mm-hmm. Okay. Hi, welcome back. Thank you so much, Michael. And our next speaker is Margot Reiskind from the University of Prince Edward Island. Please go ahead, Margot.
Hi there. So I'm Margot Reiskind at UPEI, and I am a sessional member of faculty. I've been a member of the faculty this is my 8th year at UPEI, and I'm also a member of the executive committee of the Faculty Association and a grievance officer. And I'm really here to tell you kind of a story, and unfortunately I don't have an end to the story because it is ongoing. But kind of the story of how we snatched what I would call a stalemate from the jaws of defeat in the face of bargaining while under COVID restrictions. UPEI is a small university. We have about 450 teaching members of the association, and the year to year, the number of faculty who are contract academic staff shifts, but it goes anywhere from 40% to about 55% year to year, depending on what's going on. And we also have kind of two different classes of contract academic staff. We have limited term contract. Those are people who have either 8 or 10 or 12-month contracts that are considered, assistant professors, but who they're not tenure stream and they don't have any job security. They can be terminated at any time. And then we also have what many people call adjuncts, or we call them sessionals, like myself, who are hired on a per course basis. And like many places, that group of people rotates or is about split, I would say, evenly between people like myself who teach pretty much full time and have been there long term, and a group of people who teach casually every once in a while. So that's kind of where we are. And we were in way back in the pre-pandemic times, we were getting ready for bargaining this spring. And I believe we were our plan was to open negotiations on something like March 20th. And of course, on March 13th, that was our last regular teaching day. And so by the time March 20th rolled around and everything had shut down and there was a lot of fear that we were hearing reach out from our faculty, that they were really afraid of what was going to happen in bargaining. So that's how we started our bargaining this time around, which was not what we were expecting. And our plan was very much for this to be the round that was really going to strengthen the rights of contract academic staff at UPEI. And in particular, we were looking to really tighten up a lot of the language. We do have right of recall for sessionals in particular, and we have quite a lot of measures in the collective agreement, but some of the language is quite loose. And predictably, the employer has a tendency to interpret it to their advantage and do things like put off paying people their 6% in lieu of benefits for sometimes several years, accidentally, knock people off the rosters and deny them seniority points and things like that. So we were really looking at that. We were really looking at pushing forward a pro rata model for our faculty. And we have the advantage of being in a small market. The island is small. We all know each other. And it's a small news market as well. So, anything public that we were to do, there's a real chance that the president would find himself on the CBC answering questions from the local campus people. So that's what we were going in with. We had a plan. We were ready to go. We were ready to open, and then everything shut down, and fear in everyone's hearts. What actually happened at that point was that the university blinked first, and I'm very grateful for that. They came to us and they said what they wanted was labor peace, and they wanted it because they knew that there may not be labor peace at some other regional schools, and they wanted us to be looking pretty stable. The president of the university actually made several calls to the president of the union to discuss just a straight rollover. They wanted a straight renewal for 4 years of the agreement as it was, which was unilaterally turned down. What his negotiation directly with our president, and this is not a negotiation in real terms, but his discussion with our president, Sharon Myers, at that time, his next offer was basically a rollover of the agreement for 2 years with a 2% salary increase each year of the agreement. And that's what our president brought to the executive committee, and that almost everyone was very happy with. And I understand why they were happy with it, but I was the lone dissenter, and I think that's why I'm here today. While I understood, particularly, I know a lot of full-time faculty, and UPEI has been in a position in the past of actually seeing rollbacks on full-time faculty salary. So I certainly understood the fears, but I was not willing to take a deal that said, you guys can wait for next time. If it was that important. And we had a strong bargaining survey. We had strong support before COVID on the part of full-time faculty. We had done some work in communicating the fact that we were going to be doing something, and we really had strong faculty support. And I just said, I'm not, you know, I'm not willing to just say, oh, well, never mind. And it was a bit contentious. But in the end, that the agreement was passed in the executive committee, and I dissented. I was the lone dissenter. And I'm happy, I'm comfortable with that. So what our president did, and I'm very grateful to her for having done this, is she said, you know, you're right. We can't just say, well, never mind. You know, 2% of nothing is really still almost nothing, and it doesn't do anything for the real problems for our contract academic staff. And so she took the numbers of faculty support from the bargaining survey and sat down directly with the president and said, you need to do something for the contract academic staff, or we will not put this forward to ratification. And what they gave us was, again, almost nothing, but not nothing. What they ended up giving us was they topped up the sessional pay. So we actually got, I think it's an additional $300 per stipend. And so that he could have his clean rollover, which is what he wanted to give to the Board of Governors. They did it at the end of the previous agreement, and then that meant that the 2% is on top of that increase, which means that for sessionals in particular, we've achieved essentially a 9% pay raise over 2 years, which is certainly better than 2%. Where I say I don't know how the story ends is because, you know, it became clear that negotiations going forward, I have to talk fast now, negotiations going forward are always going to have COVID hanging over our heads. And the question was, now what do we do? And especially, how do we keep the momentum going and grow the momentum so that even with COVID in front of them, our full-time faculty, who are still strong, the most of our membership, our full-time faculty are willing to stand up and say, no, this has to be handled. One of the things that we've done is to create an all-new working group for contract academic staff within the union. We've done that very publicly. It gives us the advantage of having an opportunity to talk to different stakeholders. It gives us an opportunity to present a report at every meeting of every AGM that we hold. It gives us an opportunity to keep this front and center. And what our mandate is basically communications. We are looking at activities like what we're doing now, and just keeping the issue front and center, and also reaching out to other stakeholders. We're going to be talking to the student union. We're looking at a campaign like Why Should You Care? Really to let people on campus understand, because this is where we realize there is a lack of understanding of what it means for other people, that there are people on campus who are underpaid and under-resourced compared to other members of faculty. Our students think that it doesn't affect them, and they are wrong. So that's our story. We don't know how it ends yet, but I'm very pleased that we didn't get nothing in the last round. That we considered that a good start and a warning, so that hopefully now upper administration will be paying attention when they start seeing organizing from the contract academic faculty. Thank you.
Thank you, Margot. And it's really encouraging to hear both from you and Michael that there can be pretty good concrete gains. So well done. We'd like to hear now from Patrice Blais from Concordia University. Go ahead, Patrick.
Ouais, alors, bon après-midi tout le monde. Et puis, écoutez, je vais faire un petit partage d'écran. Excusez-moi, j'ai ma logistique. On va y arriver. Donc. OK. petit problème technique. OK, alors, bonjour. Alors, aujourd'hui, je vais vous faire une courte présentation sur la stratégie, des stratégies qui ont été, qui sont utilisées par CUPFA durant avec tout ce qui arrive avec la pandémie de la COVID-19. Donc, nous entrons en période de négociation. Et notre convention collective se termine le 30 avril 2021. Et les négociations de la 7e convention collective vont débuter en novembre 2020, donc dans environ 3-4 semaines. Donc, CUPFA, qu'est-ce que c'est? C'est 750 membres actifs. Nous représentons seulement des membres qui sont contractuels. Et il a été annoncé, évidemment, que le campus est fermé jusqu'en mai 2021. Donc, tous les cours sont donnés à distance. Donc, la question s'est posée à savoir, est-ce que nous allons entrer en négociation et puis surtout, quels vont être les défis au niveau de pas de la motivation, mais de la mobilisation de nos membres. Donc, la réflexion, elle a été de dire, on garde le plan et on y va en négociation. Il y a d'autres syndicats à l'université qui ont choisi de plutôt prolonger leur convention collective. Ils ont négocié des augmentations de salaire et ils ont décidé de ne rien toucher. Nous, on a pris l'autre route. Et je vais vous expliquer un peu les stratégies qu'on a établies. Tout d'abord, une stratégie de mobilisation qu'on a utilisée dès lorsque les cours ont commencé à être donnés à distance. On a mis en place un buddy system qui a très bien fonctionné. Originalement, le buddy system était pour, en fond, assister nos membres qui avaient un peu moins d'expertise au niveau des technologies et des nouveaux outils technologiques qui étaient requis pour donner les cours à distance. Donc, on avait fait un appel à tous, il y a des gens qui s'étaient offerts et dans le fond, on faisait un match un peu avec quelqu'un qui avait besoin d'assistance et on le mettait en lien, dans le fond, on le jumelait avec un membre qui avait plus d'expérience. Et on a eu 16 membres qui ont pris avantage, donc 32 membres qui ont participé, donc 16 qui ont reçu d'assistance de 16 autres membres. On a beaucoup aimé ce système-là et en fait, on est en train un peu de l'étendre également. Et on va s'en servir également. Évidemment, on va continuer à l'utiliser le temps de la COVID pour les nouvelles technologies, mais aussi d'étendre le système pour les nouveaux membres. Bon, excusez, est-ce que tout va bien? Donc, on a toujours un 20-30 membres qui arrivent à chaque année. Donc, avec le buddy system, on va l'utiliser de façon plus générale avec le syndicat afin de pouvoir jumeler ces membres-là, afin qu'ils puissent découvrir la vie syndicale avec dans le fond, et en fond, apprendre l'université, apprendre c'est quoi la vie syndicale, la vie associative, etc., etc. Maintenant, une autre chose, évidemment, que je pense qu'il y a plusieurs autres syndicats aussi qui ont transféré leur réunion des membres en ligne via Zoom. En fait, je ne pense pas qu'on a inventé quoi que ce soit avec ça. Cependant, ce que nous avons fait, c'est que nous avons augmenté le nombre de rencontres. On en a quand même tenu beaucoup. Puis on s'est rendu compte aussi, surtout lorsqu'il y avait la période du confinement, les gens ne pouvaient pas sortir, les gens ne se voyaient pas. Ces rencontres-là sont devenues un peu, c'est rendu, on dirait, une activité sociale on avait énormément de participation, plus que dans nos rencontres en présentiel. Donc ce fut un outil où est-ce qu'on a été, disons, étonnamment surpris par la participation. On s'est rendu compte que c'était peut-être pas juste les informations qu'on voulait donner, mais c'était aussi un genre d'un peu d'activité sociale pour nos membres. Et dans nos négociations aussi, on est allé avec Objectif normatif. Un peu notre théorie était que les gouvernements garochent des milliards à gauche, à droite, et puis qu'est-ce qui arrive? À un moment donné, ben, le robinet va s'éteindre. Et puis, qu'est-ce qui va arriver? Ben, les universités qui sont financées par le gouvernement risquent d'écoper. Puis, ils risquent d'avoir des grosses coupures. Donc, la pandémie, le résultat, c'est qu'on va s'en aller éventuellement dans des négociations monétaires très difficiles. Donc, on a mis un angle sur le normatif afin justement de pouvoir leur donner une priorité. En se disant, si l'argent n'est pas trop sur la table, bien, on va aller essayer d'aller chercher le plus possible en normatif. Entre autres, au niveau des affichages, des qualifications, on a des demandes comme quoi on veut que si un cours est affiché pour un contractuel, bien que les qualifications ne soient pas supérieures à un professeur à temps plein ou n'importe qui d'autre qui enseigne le cours. Les qualifications devraient être constantes. C'est une demande qui va être très difficile à faire passer à l'université, même si ça semble très logique. Mais puis également au niveau des affichages. Les affichages sont faits unilatéralement évidemment par les départements. Et on a toutes sortes d'histoires d'horreur qui ressortent de ça. Donc, on va essayer d'avoir un système où est-ce qu'on peut avoir un certain contrôle sur les affichages afin justement que ça ne soit pas ce qu'on dit en anglais un peu un free-for-all. Donc, ce sont les trois différentes stratégies que je voulais vous présenter. Donc, 1, le body system, 2, les réunions Zoom et pour les négociations, un emphase sur les enjeux normatifs. Je vous remercie beaucoup.
Merci, Patrick. And our last speaker is going to be joining us. And if you could start for us, please.
Hi.
Kimberly Ellis Hale.
My name's Kimberly, and I am a 22-year veteran of contract faculty teaching at the university, or Wilfrid Laurier University. And I wanted to share with you our mobilization efforts that we put into place for our last round of negotiations, not the most recent. Most recently, we did concentrated bargaining, which focused very heavily on the negotiating team. But the one that we began in 2016. In preparing for it, I noticed just how much the landscape has changed under COVID, and I'm sure all of you are feeling it. I know I am. But there are still some things from the 2016 campaign that I think are worthwhile. And so before I sort of launch into that, I do want to point out that none of us can really do this alone. It is the team that we have, the folks that we reach out to. And in that vein, I'd like to just acknowledge that at the time we had a contract faculty president for our association, Michelle Kramer. Our chief negotiator was Jim Gerlach, and the negotiating team member and person responsible for communication was Anne-Marie Allison. So I just want to put that out there because we don't do this alone, or we shouldn't be doing this alone. So I have a number of points that I want to talk about quickly. The first is begin before you think you should. Your calendar should be your best friend ever. Give before you ask. So often contract faculty are asked to do things with no recognition, no compensation. So make sure that you're giving something before you ask them to do something. Meet people where they are, right? I think that's really important. Communicate, communicate, and communicate. There is nothing more damaging to a mobilization effort than the absence of communication. And then I'd like to talk about believing. And I think that's really important. So first, begin before you think you should. Often you hear of mobilization campaigns that lurch from one contract renewal to another. So every 4 years you reach out to your members. And this is something that is becoming exceptionally clear to me, particularly under COVID. At Laurier, we have set up an online content management group for contract faculty. So we can reach out, we can answer questions, there can be discussions. It is a way of valuing our own members and not just as sort of people willing to carry placards every 4 years. So in terms of beginning before you think, we didn't actually begin early enough. We began our mobilization efforts about 9 months before our contract ended. I would say that continuing mobilization efforts are important. In terms of a calendar, when I pulled up mine from 2016, it was 25 pages long. I'm a little anal when it comes to a calendar, but it really does help in terms of scheduling your communications, ensuring that there is a constant effort to reach out to people. The number of times that you have touch points, the more likely you are to capture people. So we began with a monthly newsletter, and then we dropped it down to something about every 3 weeks over the summer. And yes, contract faculty are reading their email during the summer. And when we really ramped things up in September, we began every 2 weeks, followed by weekly communications into the winter break. When I say give before you ask, I think that's really important. For those of us who are contract faculty, we know that well. So one of the things that we did in the fall is we recognized the effort that contract faculty had made, particularly our long-serving contract faculty. And so an email was sent out to everybody asking that, first of all, acknowledging how important they were to Laurier, and then asking them to think about how many students over their time at Laurier had they taught, and could they share that? I was amazed that within 2 weeks, the number of contract faculty who responded with the number of students they had taught had reached over 250,000. And I think that that was really important. Each time an email was sent, I responded personally, thanking them. We took the information and did an ad campaign, recognizing just how important contract faculty were, raising their contributions publicly. We published this information in school newspapers, then community newspapers. So it was out 6 times. And I think that was really important. Contract faculty began to feel valued, and they saw their contribution in numbers that could not be argued with. Then I would say, meet people where they are. Right now, during the pandemic, Zoom seems to be the way we communicate with each other. And having times available for people to meet, to reach out, is important. Isolation is a problem for contract faculty outside of the situation we find ourselves in, and it's become even more pressing, particularly with all the other responsibilities that we have in our personal lives, and then add in workload and the constant concern about course cancellations and employment security. In terms of meeting people where they were during 2016, it had to do with availability. I had often heard that contract faculty weren't that engaged, that it was tough reaching out to them. I think that when we begin to value our contract faculty and we make ourselves available and we respond personally, that contract faculty absolutely are there. In terms of communication, You can't communicate enough. And one of the things we found that was very useful was the use of blast surveys. It allowed us to highlight the issues that we were bringing to the bargaining table. It allowed us to gather information from contract faculty to start a conversation. We started off asking about what's in a name. At Laurier, contract faculty were referred to as contract academic staff, which isn't an issue because that's how CAUT refers to all faculty. But among the students, it was an issue, and it had to do with an idea of who we were. So we started the blast surveys asking them simply, very simple questions, what they thought was important about a name. We started off with that survey and we had 162 people respond. The next survey, blast survey again, in 2 weeks' time was about office space. We had 198 people respond. The third survey had to do with time with students. We made that question more complicated because it was supposed to help inform what was happening at the bargaining table. And what we saw was a drop of almost 70% in terms of, or 70 people in terms of who responded. So then we went back to a question that was easier, that would show up on your screen without having to open it, that you could get a sense of what was important. And our numbers jumped back up to 176. When it came to the bargaining unit meeting, we had an overwhelming show, and we had over 94% support for our negotiating team. So communications is really important. And then we also had newsletters. We had campaigns that were both on social media as well as on campus, which we can't do right now. And then the last thing I want to talk about was believe. You need to believe in ways that overshadow some of the challenges we face. I remember in the fall, I reached out to the city to ask about porta-johns and fire barrels, because what are they going to say? Give me some information and then very quickly reach out to the university. I believe that we were going to go on strike. And I wanted the people that I represented to believe that the union were supporting them in getting a better deal. And if I didn't believe, how could I expect administration to believe that we were ready? We got our strike office and had a strike office open house. We filled all the rosters for strike action, which, by the way, I got from CUPFA. And that's probably something that's worth mentioning. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are lots of folks out there with resources that are more than willing to share. So CUPFA was great. They have a whole database. They can put you in contact with people who can give you a hand. And CAUT is also a resource. We held a communication seminar that CAUT came and provided just before the winter break. People thought that we wouldn't be able to fill it, and we had to turn people away. So I think that in believing and being organized, having your calendar, reaching out to people where they are, giving before asking, and making sure that you are targeting your various groups, your members, other unions on campus, and your community can really help. I don't envy anyone who is organizing right now, but I do want to let you know that if there's anything that I can offer, I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kimberly. I really appreciate these presentations from everybody, and I've learned a lot. And I think at the end of these presentations, I feel a lot of hope. There are a lot of concrete suggestions and concrete wins. So thank you so much to all our speakers. So now we have